Hi, today we are going to talk about Circle of Willis using virtual reality. First, we'll start with the major branches. The first one right here is the common carotid artery on the right side and the vertebral artery on the right side. On the left side, we have the left common carotid artery and the left vertebral artery. Okay, let's make the view more clear. The right common carotid artery gives rise to the internal carotid artery and the external carotid artery. Similarly, on the left side, we have the left common carotid artery giving rise to the internal carotid and external carotid artery. Okay, for posterior circulation, we would be looking at the vertebral arteries. These vertebral arteries arise from the subclavian arteries. Now, the right one vertebral artery and the left vertebral artery. They, be, they both will join to form the basilar artery. The basilar artery forms at the posterior part of the brain. Now this one is the left vertebral artery and this one is the right vertebral artery, forming the basilar artery at the posterior part of the brain. Now the basilar artery gives rise to the posterior cerebral arteries, the left and right posterior cerebral arteries that supplies to the posterior part of the brain. Now coming towards the anterior blood circulation to the brain, the internal carotid arteries, now they will give branch to the anterior cerebral arteries, and the anterior cerebral arteries will supply blood to the anterior part of the brain. Now look at the division. The common carotid artery giving rise to the internal carotid arteries, and then the internal carotid arteries giving rise to the anterior cerebral arteries. We will remove the bones. Okay, let's have a closer look. Let me adjust the view. Now look, here is the posterior communicating artery, which is communicating the anterior cerebral artery to the posterior cerebral arteries. Okay, the anterior cerebral artery on the left side and the anterior cerebral artery on the right side. They both are communicated by the anterior communicating artery. This one is the middle cerebral artery, which supplies blood supply to the middle part of the brain. Now the basilar artery giving rise to the posterior cerebral arteries on the left and right. The posterior communicating artery communicating the anterior and the posterior cerebral arteries. And now this whole loop is circle of Willis. Okay, now I will give you guys a quick revision. Let me select a more clear view. Okay. Now look at the arch of aorta, giving rise to the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and the left subclavian artery. Now the common carotid arteries giving rise to the internal carotid arteries on both sides, They both will give rise to the anterior cerebral arteries, and both the anterior cerebral arteries will be communicated by anterior communicating artery. On the posterior side, we have the vertebral arteries. From the left and the right side, they both will combine to give the basilar artery, and the basilar artery will then give supply to the posterior part of the brain through the posterior cerebral arteries. And now this is a complete circle of Willis. I hope you guys have understood the concept. Thank you.